2, 1. Okay. Thank you. Oh Hashem, thank you to the Goldsteins for letting us do this year. And B'ezrat Hashem, this will be I don't think we'll have class next week because of the Tisha B'Av. Although maybe we can do something in lieu. If people want, I'll ask Rabbi. We can do maybe a shir on Kamsa ben and Bar Kamsa and the Gemara. We can talk about that. And how that they destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, how that led to the destruction.
The guy who had the party.
Here, you can. We'll leave the food out. We'll leave the food out, but you can't eat it. That's you make it even harder.
That's the guy who had the party and.
Yeah. So maybe we'll talk about that. I'll talk to Rabbi and see what he says. So we are in Mesilat Yesharim. We ended off last time in the middle. We brought a pasuk from the Torah that it said that Moshe Rabbeinu, he said, "Ve'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elohecha shoel me'imach ki im le'yira et Hashem Elohecha lelechet b'chol derachav ve'la'avod." Yeah, in the introduction still. We are on. If you're using these books, we're on page 14. 16. Sorry. 16 or 14? I thought we finished. 16. Correct. Yeah. 16. Sorry.
And the green book is just page 6.
Mm-hmm. And so we brought this pasuk that Moshe kind of gives you the guidelines on how to act, how to be like the perfect Jew, and the Ramchal broke it down into 5 kind of categories, where he said it's a fear of God, walking in His ways, loving Hashem, completeness of heart, and observance of the mitzvot. And so we talked a little bit about last time the idea of what is a fear of Hashem, what is love of Hashem, what is going in His path. And just to finish off that list, we're going to talk about the last 2 things now, Shlemut HaLev and Shmirat Kol HaMitzvot. So the Ramchal says, Shlemut HaLev hu shetiyeh ha'avodah lefanav yitbarach betohar hakavana. That the completeness of heart means that when someone services Hashem, he works, he performs mitzvot, that everything should be with pure motives. That means that even the motive to get schar, to get reward, is already a motive that is on a little lower level. Like in Pirkei Avot, it says that you should strive to be like workers who work without lekabel pras, people that do not work to not get reward. Rather, you should work Hashem for no reward. Meaning you should work for pure intentions, pure motives. And so he's going to explain that the tahainu letachlit ha'avodato bilvad, that the sole purpose of serving Him, velo shum pniya acheret, and no other motive. The idea that you're servicing Hashem in and of itself should be the reason why you're doing it. Nowadays we don't have the mashal. They always bring the mashal of the melech. Nowadays we don't have that much of a melech figure. We don't have the king figure nowadays. But lahavdil, what we have, maybe you can say a president, somewhere like something like that. And so, let's say, for example, a president asked you to come and to give you a cup of water. All right, how are you going to come to give a cup of water in joggers and a sweatshirt? No, you're going to come. You're going to wear a nice tie, a suit, or a nice dress, and you're going to come and give him the cup of water, even though it's just giving a cup of water. How many times do you give a cup of water to kids, wife, spouse, whatever it may be? And yet when the president asks you, well, suddenly it's a big deal. There's going to be press there and everyone's going to be watching. And so the same thing, every time we do a mitzvah, who are we doing the mitzvah? For the King of all kings, for Hashem. So how much more so should we always present ourselves in that way? Not only that, the fact that we're servicing Hashem in and of itself is the simcha, is the happiness that we get from the act. And so when someone searches his heart and he realizes that the whole purpose he's doing the action is to please Hashem, is for Hashem, then that's what we say is shlemut halev. That's no other purpose, and that's the goal. That's the ideal way of servicing Hashem. ונכלל בזה שיהיה ליבו שלם בעבודה ולא כפוסח על שתי הסעיפים. So we're saying that it also included in this idea of shlemut halev is that one needs to always be wholehearted in his service, meaning he's not always dancing between two options, two yetzers, right? When someone he has two, they say that you should work Hashem with all of your hearts, right? We say in the Shema, with all of your hearts. And the Chazal says, what is called all of your hearts? It means with the two inclinations that we have, the good inclination and then the bad inclination. And the idea behind that is that we need to, because also it says in Perkei Avot, it says Ezehu Gibor, who is considered a strong person. It doesn't say Arnold Schwarzenegger. It doesn't say someone who goes to the gym for 7 hours. All right. Who does it say? Ezehu Gibor. Who is the strong person? Hakovesh et yitzro. Someone who is able to overpower his yetzer, his evil inclination. Now the idea, we have to pay attention to the word hakovesh, who overpowers his yetzerah. It doesn't say he obliterates it. It doesn't say he eradicates it. It doesn't say he deletes it. It says he overpowers. Kovesh. What does it mean, kovesh, to overpower? It means that he's still going to be there, because at the end of the day, as even la'atid lavo, Hashem is going to destroy the yetzer hara, but only the yetzer hara on the bad side, because there's a yetzer hara that always tries to bring you to do averot, but there's also a yetzer hara that you need to use his powers for mitzvot. The Gemara brings down in Masechet Yoma that one time the Chazal, back then Anshe Knesset Agdolah, they had this, I guess, big power, and they came together and were going to destroy the yetzer hara of avodah zarah, of idol worship. And so they got together. They were able to do all of these kavanot, and it says that the yetzer hara came down and they destroyed it, of avodah zarah. That's why nowadays we don't have such an inclination, we don't have such a ta'ava, a desire to do avodah zarah, to do idolatry, as back then was. The Gemara relates that Menashe, the king of Chizkiyahu, was a wicked king, and one time Rava was teaching about him in the Beit Midrash, and he was saying, things not so nice about him, because he was, at the end of the day, the Gemara says he's one of the kings that don't have a share in Olam Haba. That night he went to sleep, and who was in his dream? Menashe. The king Menashe came to him in his dream, and he said, "Hey, listen, you got to ease up on me." I said, "What do you mean ease up on me? You're a Rasha." He said, "What do you mean? If you were in my days and going and being with the people that I was with, you would have lifted up your garment." Back then they would wear like tunics. You would lift up your tunic and run towards the avodah zarah to worship them also. So nowadays we don't know what the yetzer hara is for that. Why? Because the Anshe Knesset Agdolah, the Gemara says, they eradicated that yetzer hara for it. So after that, they were so successful, they saw such great things, people weren't running towards this yetzer hara. They said, okay, next up is the yetzer hara for gilu arayot, immorality. Let's do it. So they got out, they went to go do it, and they didn't kill it this time. They captured it. They wanted to do an experiment to see maybe if it's a good thing, if it's not a good thing. So they captured him, and they put him in like a jail. I don't really know how it worked, but they put him in a jail. And it says that for 3 days or so, they looked all of Israel, and they did not find a single egg. It says because the yetzer hara for immorality, for gilu arayot, also is that force, that driving force that makes a man and woman want to be together, and including on animals. And so it said that they couldn't find one egg. The Anshe Knesset Gedolah said, we should learn from here then that it's not a good idea to kill the yetzer hara of the gilu arayot. Rather, what did they do? They blinded him. And the Mefarshim say, what does blinded mean? It means that the people don't have a desire to be with their relatives as much as they did back then. I guess that was more of a... Again, nowadays it's hard for us to really understand that, because nowadays we don't have that yetzer hara. But back then, it says that one of the Gemara brings down also in Yom over there. It says that when Am Yisrael was crying about the fish and the food that they had in Egypt, one of the opinions is it wasn't food mamash, it wasn't actual food, it was the ability to be with their relatives, because until then they didn't have the Torah. In Egypt they didn't have the Torah. Now that they had the Torah, that they weren't allowed to be intimate with their relatives, and so that's what they were crying about. That's what the Gemara says. So it is gross, 100%. But nowadays we don't understand what it is through idolatry. Why do people bow down to a figure, we don't have it's out of the scope of our understanding.
Catholics and Hindus.
Because of their ability to destroy the yetzer hara.
Excuse me for a second. I want to share with everybody here something that I've been remiss not to. Rabbi Klein a couple of years ago said something in a drasha that was one of the most profound things I have experienced. It was in recent years. He and I mentioned each other every time before we daven. I mentioned it one time, and a black adder comes out the synagogue and comes up to me and thanks me. I said, "What? I heard you tell your brother." Rabbi Klein said, and it's really helped me. It helped him all the time. Torah study davening. He said, when you're davening, sometimes don't fight the yetzer or avoid it. Ignore it. Yeah. Ignore it. And if you have that, and sometimes if you'll concentrate on that, sometimes it helps you focus.
Mm-hmm.
To just ignore it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's good. Thank you. So we see that the yetzer hara, although he had a bad side, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah saw that there was a need for him also. There is a need for him. And so we say also, nowadays, that there is also so the Kovesh et Yitzro doesn't mean only we don't want to eradicate him completely. Because we saw that when we eradicate him, it could bring the death to the world. There won't be any more children. We just need to kovish. We need to overpower him. Take his power and use it for the good. And so when we say bechol levavecha, levavchem, right, bechol levavecha, with the two hearts, it means the yetzer hara and also the yetzer tov. That you have to work Hashem with both the yetzer, not just one, not just the yetzer tov and say I'm putting the yetzer hara to the side. You want to work with both of them. How do you do that? It's a very hard task because you're playing with fire, right? But because you have to understand the yetzer hara, you have to understand how he works. But that's what this book is going to talk about. But you have to do tachpulot, you have to do antics against him to make sure that you're kind of straying him to do something good, to make him think that you're doing something bad, and then take him to the good. It says with David HaMelech, the Midrash brings down that when David HaMelech wanted to go to the study hall, what did he do? He tricked his yetzer hara. He said, "Today I'm going to go to the beach, or today I'm going to go to the movie theater." And so he's going to the movie theater. The yetzer hara says, "Oh, David HaMelech, I can get him to go to the movie theater? Go! It's going to be a sunny day. The food, the grass, birds are going to be chirping. There's not going to be any void. There's not going to be any emails. There's nothing. You're going to be a quiet morning. Everything's going to go smoothly. Why? Because he wants him to go to the movie theater." So he's going on the way. Suddenly, on the way to the movie theater, what does he see? He sees a Beit Midrash. Suddenly he jumps into the Beit Midrash and learns the rest of the day. The yetzer hara says, "Whoa, what just happened here? I was duped." All right? He made me work against him so that everything would work out perfectly, and then he just went and studied the whole day. So that's how. So he says, from this we can learn how we can take the yetzer hara, his power to strive, make a person strive, and then service it with Hashem. And so that's what we're saying here, that we're able to, if someone is always between these two sides, he's always going between these two options, that's not considered wholeness of heart. And we explained it now, because the wholeness of heart means you're taking the yetzer hara and also using that to service Hashem. Or, כעושה מצווה אנשים מלומדה, אלא שיהיה כל ליבו נתון לזה. And this is probably one of the hardest things, is that one who performs mitzvot or performs the service of Hashem automatically, robotically, without the heart. So we talked about servicing Hashem with, let's say, half of the heart, right? And now we're saying he services Hashem with no heart. Okay? Those are two things that we want to try avoiding. Because when someone is, it's part of human nature. You do something too often, it becomes second nature, especially when you talk about tefillah, for example, praying, right? How many times are we able to come into the tefillah with the same fervor, the same passion that we did maybe the first time, or after we went, or when we were at the kotel, or when we came back from a uplifting speech or something like that? It's a one-time kind of charge, and then it fades out. Why? Because it becomes monotonous. It's the same words. It's the same kind of service every day. And that's part of the yetzer hara's trick. It's one of his antics. We're going to see later on that the Ramchal compares the yetzer hara to Paro from Egypt. Why? Because Paro said, as long as they keep doing the same service, they're going to be coming into this lull where they're not going to think and they're just going to do. And I'd rather them not thinking. The best thing is for the Jew not to think, because if you give the Jew to think, then that's when all the good stuff and all the bad stuff can happen. But mainly the good stuff we want to focus on. And that's why he says that if it wasn't for Shabbat in Egypt, we would never have been out of Egypt. Because the Shabbat is that one day we get to rest, we get to restructure, rethink, and then move back on. So it's probably one of the hardest things to do is to not do these mitzvot out of rote. And usually the best way to do that is always just to, and we'll see, is the first step on his, and we'll see that today, is Torah, is to learn, always to learn. When you're praying, right? Learn about the prayer. Don't just take it for granted. Don't just look at the translation. It's also good to learn about it, right? And a lot of the prayer is based on Tehillim, on Psalms, right? So there's a lot of Midrashim that talks about Psalms. There's Mam Lo'ez, that's amazing on all of the Psalms. And if there's one psalm that we mention in the prayers, maybe open up a midrash on that, learn it. The next time when you're reading that psalm, suddenly it's more impactful, it's more meaningful because you kind of understand maybe the backstory behind it. And then when you pray, suddenly you have more emotion, you have more thanks to Hashem, rather than just reading the words sometimes and just kind of going by. So then we get to the final component that Moshe mentioned, and that's Shmirat Kol HaMitzvot Kemashma'o, is to observe all of the commandments as they are. Because there's people who do the commandments, right? Up until now, we also said this last time, that maybe someone says, I'm a good person, I'm good to my friends, I love Hashem, I fear Hashem, I don't do anything bad. But if you don't do the mitzvot, then, right, well, what have you accomplished? Because that's what Hashem wants in this world, right? And we said that the mitzvot are actually the embodiment of the person. We said just like there's 613 mitzvot, 365 lo ta'aseh, negative commandments, and 248 positive commandments. We said a person also has 248 evarim, bones and limbs, and 365 ligaments and sinews. And he says, Dahainu shmirat kol mitzvot kulan bechol ditukei utnaehen. And it means not only just to do the mitzvot, but also to do the mitzvot in all of their details and requirements. And he's going to give a couple examples of that later on in the chapter of Nikiyut. But that's the kind of the 5 pillars as far as what Moshe Rabbeinu kind of laid out for us. Now, the Ramchal, although he brings us in his Akdama, he doesn't focus on those 5. And he focuses on those 5, but he kind of breaks it up into 10. So those are the 5, but now he's going to break it up into 10, and this 10 is going to be based on the famous bright of Rav Pinchas ben Yair. That's what he's going to say. V'hineh kol ele klalim tzarchim perush gadol. Each one of these categories needs considerable explanation, a lot of review. Why? Because, like what we said, each one is just a klal. It's just a summary. It's just a bullet point, right? It's just the header. Then you're going to need to understand all of the backstory behind all of these headers, and that's what this book is basically based off of. Matzati lechachmenu zichronon libracha sheklalu hachalakim haele beseder chaluk acher yoter prati. And he said, I found that the sages brought into fruition, into writing, that these 5 elements are organized into a more specific, more step-by-step approach, and he'll explain that now. Musadar lefi hadraga hamitztarechet bahem niknot otam al nachon. And so it's a step-by-step approach that it's necessary in order to acquire them, because we know that within anything in life that you shouldn't always jump. You shouldn't jump levels. You have to go step by step. You have to go a little bit at a time. In the end of Parshas Yitro, which with the Parsha that we got the Torah, at the very end, he starts talking about a couple things that seem not really related to the Parsha. It talks about one of the things is you have to build a ramp to the Mizbech, to the altar. And it says that the mizbeah, the ramp, has to be like a ramp. It has to be gradual. It can't be steps. And so why not? So the Mefarshim say that if it's a step, the Kohanim are going to feel that they can jump the step. They want to, go faster up the ramp. So what do? They jump steps, and that's not good. Why? What's going to happen if someone jumps steps? Someone who gets so happy he jumps. So what's going to happen? He's going to fall and he's going to hurt himself. And so instead, they go a ramp, meaning step by step, a gradual growth. And so from here we can learn a very big lesson, and this is again one of the antics of the yetzer. The yetzer, he wants a person to always jump levels. You see especially this with regards to people who are balei teshuva. When they first start to come back to Judaism, they like to always take on all the chumrah, all the stringencies. They like to take Shabbat in extremely early, and then they do Rabbeinu Tam. And then in the winter, that's fine, but then try doing that in the summer when when everything's when you're coming out of Shabbat already late, and then you do another 72 minutes. So it's at first everything's always it's called orot, it's called lights. Everything's always new and fresh, and everyone wants to always, especially with the balei teshuva, they always want to take more things on, they want to do more. But what happens is a person needs gradual growth. They can't jump into the deep end, like they say in English, right? And so what happens with that is something in Kabbalah, it's called shbirat kelim, breaking of the vessels. And so the idea of this is for example, let's say I take a cup, and instead of putting it under a faucet and it fills up naturally, I go take a fire hose over here at the fire station and put it into the cup. What's going to happen? There's not going to be any. So the cup's going to burst, and there's not going to be any water in the cup. And so the same thing with a person. It says when they jump these levels, what can happen is they can bring on too much light into themselves, and they can break. Well, probably the easiest example of this is someone who wins the lottery. All right, someone who wins the lottery, what happens is an influx of wealth, and most of the people don't know how to handle all of this wealth, and they end up poorer than they were before winning the lottery. Yes.
I'd like the opportunity to be able
I would like that.
I'd like to be able to just that opportunity.
And I agree with you. And so what happens is that they end up poorer than they started out. And it's this is called shbirat kelim. It's the breaking of the vessels. As the person can't handle all of this influx of light, influx of holiness. And so when the main part of the temple, what's the main part of the temple? The altar. You're bringing the korbanot to Hashem. Hashem saying, in the most holy spot, in the holiest place in the whole entire world, I want you to do a ramp. Why? So everyone will see that you have to go out gradually. No step by step, no jumping of the step. Everything has to be gradual. And so the Ramchal says that these steps, he could have learned it from Moshe's 5 pillars. But he found something that's more progressive, something that can be taken into life and goes more gradually. And so now he's going to say the famous braita, "V'hu ma she'amru bebraita huv'a b'mekomot shonim b'shas." He's bringing it in from a braita that's in various places in Shas, and there's a difference of girsa'ot. There's a difference of how these, the order of these are laid out, but the way he brings it is going to be the one that he explains it. Ve'echad mehen beperek lifnei edehem. It's in the tractate of Avodah Zarah, in the perek, the chapter of Lifnei Edehen, which talks about Avodah Zarah, is talking about idolatry. And we'll see in a second, Rav Tzadok Milublin, he brings down that every agadata that's in Shas is specifically placed in the place for a specific reason. There's not, like the Torah, how we say each word is placed in the Torah, and if it's out of order or it's spelled weird or it's spelled differently, there's a meaning behind that. Rav Tzadok says the same thing with the Gemara, with the Talmud. If there's a story in a certain place in the Gemara, there's a reason for that. He brings one of the famous cases is that we'll see, if we're going to learn about it next week, the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Right, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Where is this story located? It's located in the tractate of Gittin. Gittin, what does Gittin talk about? It talks about when a man wants to divorce his wife, he has to give her a get. It's a divorce document. And which chapter it is. It's in the 5th chapter called chapter of the Nezikin. Nezikin is damages, and it's usually you have a whole track. You have a whole seder. You have a whole a sidra on Nezikin, and Gitin is in the book of Nashim. It's in the order of woman, which talks about woman, Kiddushin, Gitin, all of these things. So it's kind of odd that you have suddenly a chapter called Nezikin. So Rav Tzadok says it's not random, right? Because you talk about all of the story of Bar Kamsa and Bar Kamsa and all the tragic events that happened during the Beit HaMikdash and the destruction of it. Where is it all located? It's located in the tractate that's talking about Gitin, talking about divorce documents. Why? Because Hashem Kiviyachol divorced Israel with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And what was it called? It's in the 5th chapter called Nezikin, right? The Nezikin damages, because of that we damaged the world. It says a lot of things happened because of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. It says the fruit don't taste as sweet, the air isn't as sweet. There's a lot of life is lacking because of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So it was a nezik, it was a destructive force to the whole entire world. And we'll see in a second that with this, it's not a coincidence that it's also located in Avodah Zarah, which Avodah Zarah is usually we say is idolatry, but the actual meaning is the estranged work. Avodah is work, Zarah is estranged, and so we'll see there's a difference really between them. So let's first read the Braita. Ze lashono mikan amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. From here, and we'll see what does from here mean. From here, Rav Pinchas ben Yair said, Torah mevi lidei zehirut, zehirut mevi lidei zirizut, zirizut mevi lidei nekiut, nekiut mevi lidei prishut, prishut mevi lidei tahara, tahara meviya lidei chasidut, chasidut meviya lidei anava, anava meviya lidei yirat chet, yirat chet meviya lidei kedusha, kedusha meviya lidei ruach hakodesh, ruach hakodesh meviya lidei tchiat hametim. And if someone is able to do this, I want a bracha from him, but we'll bring it down. Okay, what is it? Torah study.
He also wrote that song, Chad Gad Yah.
He also wrote that Chad Gad, yeah. So we're saying that Torah study brings a person to zehirut, which is loosely translated as vigilant, watchfulness. I think each different translation has their own take on it. And then you have zehirut. We said the watchfulness, vigilance brings towards zrizut. Zerizut, again, loosely translated as alacrity, zealousness, speed. So again, each book you'll find their own translation. Then we said Zerizut mevi lidei nekiyut. The alacrity brings towards nekiyut, cleanliness, purity. Nekiyut mevi lidei prishut. Nekiyut brings one towards prishut, means abstinence, to separate. Prishut meviya lidei taharam. And then prishut, someone who's abstinent, it'll bring toward purity. Tahara mivei lidei chasidut, purity brings towards piety. Chasidut, we also said from the lashon of chesed, kindness, and we talked about that a little bit last time. That's someone who does things for Hashem, and that he wants to always do. He always, like a child wants to service his parents. He always wants to kind of preempt even the request. And then chasidut meviya lidei anava. We said piety brings towards humility. Anava meviya lidei yirat chet. And then anava, humility brings one towards fear of sin. And we said this is a higher level. There's a couple forms of fear. We talked about fear of retribution, fear of punishment. But then there's also a higher level, yirat haromemut, which is going to be what he focuses more on in that later chapter, which is more of the awe. Yirat chet miviya lidei kedusha, and then someone who's on yirat chet, he brings him to the level of kedusha, of holiness, and kedusha miviya lidei ruach hakodesh. Then he'll get to once he's on holiness, his level of holiness. We're going to see that at this point he kind of doesn't do more work. At this point, Hashem brings down the presence, ruach hakodesh, and the divine inspiration is going to be something that he's gifted. And then after that, we're going to get towards, or no, hopefully we'll get towards, if we can get all is the resurrection of the dead.
That's amazing.
So if someone is able to do that, then that's what he brings down, step by step. Mesilat Yesharim, we'll see that step by step. So just going back, and just wanted to bring some notes. So the Gemara over there says, because we're bringing Mikan Amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, over there it says that a person they're learning from the pasuk. It says that and you shall be aware of any evil things. Ushmartem otam mikol davar ra. You shall guard yourself from all evil. And then it says over there that a person should be careful not to think improper things during the day, because it might bring him to impurity at night. And then it says umikan, and from here Rav Pinchas ben Yair said, and he went about all of the what we just read. So we have to see that the basis of all of this is this idea of not thinking improper things during the day, and because it might bring impurity to at night. I saw that the Agra de Kala, the Bnei Sachar, he brings down that the idea behind this is that hirhu, thinking, right, is from also the lashon of herayon, to gestation, to pregnancy. Herayon is pregnancy. Hirhu is from the lashon of herayon, to be to pregnancy. Because the idea is, when someone thinks of something, hirhu is not just a fleeting thought. It's something that you're building on. It's something that you're dwelling on, and you're building on it. Just like a woman builds a baby. Similarly, in our minds, we can build on a thought. And just like the baby comes out in fruition and it's called a pri, it's called a fruit, so too the words or the actions that come out of that thought are also called the fruit of our labor, if you want to call it that. And actually the that's why for it's parallel. We say that, how do you say a word in Hebrew? It's called a milah, right? And the same thing with, we know that the boy at 8 days old, what does he get? A brit milah. So the milah, which is the force of the word, which means we're able to create things with it, right, is the same force that a man uses to create life with. So we see the parallel that between creation of the mouth and the creation of the body. And similarly, there's a creation that comes about that's in the brain, and that's something that's hidden. It's a creation that we don't see. It's something that doesn't come out, but it does. It's the starting point of all creation, because there has to be thought in order for there to be speech, in order for there to be action, and so without thought, there is no next step. And so he says that when someone thinks impure, what does it mean? He thinks during the day. He's thinking something impure during the day. With that impure thought, he can bring forth a creation. A creation of what? He says a creation of a mekatreg, someone who goes against him, antagonist. Yeah, adversary. Nice. Yeah, that's a good word. And so what happens is that when we think these things, even though sometimes we think it's meaningless, it's again, it's not a fleeting thought. We're saying hirhu from the shon herayon is that you're dwelling on this thought, okay? And when you're dwelling on this thought and building on it, that's going to bring forth a mekatreg, a adversary, that will cause you to stumble. And even though you might push back on that thought and not act on it, at the end of the day, there's going to be that adversary there that you need to uproot. And the Rav Tzadok brings down that that's actually one of the ideas of what teshuva is. Because really, the idea of teshuva is sometimes you can't go back on the act. Someone, we were just read in this week's parsha of Ir Miklat, someone who accidentally kills. All right? How do you do teshuva on that? The guy's dead. You go to his parents, you go to his family, say, sorry. Okay, sorry, you're not going to bring him back. All right? So how do you do teshuva on something like that? So it's actually, Rav Tzadok brings over there exactly with that example. He says, if we look at it, the how it was dispersed, the Are Miklat, there were 3 in Israel and 3 on the across the Jordan, on the other side of the Jordan. How many tribes were there on the other side of the Jordan? 2.5. How many were on the other side? 9.5. It's not proportional. All right? So the Gemara over there says no, don't worry. It's because Rashi says there were more murderers in the Transjordan. There were more murderers on the Jordan. Now everyone jumps on this. They say, "What do you mean, more murderers?" But we said Ari Miklat only saves accidental murderers. So the Tosfot brings down a whole case, and he brings out a whole case of what happens. What does it mean, accidental murderers? You said that the Ari Miklat only saves accidental murderers. So he says, no, what happened is there's a lot of murderers there, but how do murderers get put to death? Only if there are two witnesses that properly warned him beforehand, told him don't do it, and even if there's two witnesses that warned him, it might not have been enough evidence. There might be another two witnesses in court. It might be that the court case was destroyed. At the end of the day, it could be that this intentional murderer got off scot-free. He went home. He didn't get punished. So what does Hashem do? Hashem says there's no scot-free in this world. And people sometimes think they beat the court case, so they're free. They can go back. They're back to life. They think everything's good. No, Hashem always has His book out and midah keneged midah. So what does Hashem do? He brings someone to an event, whatever it may be. He brings down someone's climbing a ladder, right? And the other guy, the murderer, is now standing under the ladder, and the guy falls off the ladder and kills the murderer accidentally, right? Because it's accident.
No such thing.
So now, right? So it's no such thing. So the murderer gets put to death. Hashem made it so that the murderer put to death, and now this accidental murderer has to go to the Ir Miklat. So over there we see why. Because there's more murderers that didn't get punished, so Hashem had to bring more accidental murderers to bring them to the Ir Miklat. So he said, but the Rav Tzadok says, okay, so if you're saying all of that, then what's the problem? Why is he getting punished? Right? So he says that really, where did it all start? The accidental murderer had a thought. He had a thought in his head, a hilhul. He had he went on this thought, and it brought forth, like we just said, a mekatreg, a adversary. Now that adversary is in Hashem's ear all day, and make him sin. This guy's bad, this and that. So Hashem says, okay, what am I going to do? He has to get some form of punishment. So what am I going to do? He's going to fall off a ladder and accidentally killed, and now he has to go to Ir Miklat. Everything good, all right? So Rav Tzadok says the action is going to happen because of what happened in your mind. The action is going to happen. It's out of your control. Right? He accidentally killed the murderer. He accidentally killed someone. That was out of your control. You can't undo that. There's some acts that you cannot undo. Some sins that we cannot undo. But what we can undo is the thought. Right? And when you do teshuva, what do? You're uprooting that thought process, and you're saying that it's no longer my way of thinking. And so you're changing your whole persona. You're changing yourself. And teshuva is you're coming closer to Hashem. And so someone who's able to do that, he's able to uproot his whole thought process, his whole self. And at that point, we say that someone who does teshuva, he becomes a new person. And so when that adversary comes and he says, go punish him, this and that, Hashem says, who are you talking about? Shlomo. No, Shlomo doesn't exist anymore. This is Shlomo version 2.0. It's a different person. You must have Shlomo 1.0. I can't punish Shlomo 2.0. He's already someone else. And so that's the idea. That's how he brings down. That's the idea of teshuva. So this is the basis of this whole sefer, because we said Mikan Amar Rav Pinchas ben Yair, that the impure thoughts of the day will bring forth, because the whole idea of this, the idea of teshuva also is coming close to Hashem. Teshuva means to return to Hashem, right? And through this, we are returning towards Hashem until the point where kedusha, we'll see that the idea of kedusha is you're basically an embodiment of Hashem at that point. Like we'll see, the Ramchal brings the example of Yaakov. Yaakov was the epitome of holiness until that all of creation wanted to service him as if they were servicing Hashem. Where do we see this? That when he was in Beit El, after studying in yeshiva for 14 years, didn't sleep, but suddenly gets to a place, puts his head down under 12 rocks, and the rocks are fighting. And that night, I want to put my hand, I want my rock to be under the head of the tzaddik. I want this. They all come together and become one rock. Right? When do we see that rocks fight over whose head to put under? All right. We also see from here Yaakov was so tired he put his head under rocks, right? Who sleeps on with a pillow of rocks? But the idea is that creation wants to service the tzaddik because he's an embodiment of Hashem. Just like we want to service Hashem, when we nullify all of ourselves and we come to that idea of kedusha and we just exude holiness, we exude kedusha Hashem, then everything wants to service us. And there's many examples with Daniel in the lion pit, with Avraham in the fire. We see that nature bends to do the service of the tzaddik because he's just an embodiment of Hashem. So I just wanted to bring now he brings down this note from Rav Moshe Shapira from Afikei Mayim. He says that so I have it. You don't have it. You have the note over here on page 19, and I don't think you have the note. I brought an excerpt from the actual book, and I thought it was a pretty interesting take. So he says that if you look at the steps, really the Ramchal brings it down into 3 steps. He says that you have the stage called tzaddik, that between zehirut and chasidut, all of the idea over there is to become a tzaddik, meaning you're becoming a more perfected Jew, meaning everything is according to the book. You know, you're doing all of the halachot, you're staying away from all the bad stuff, you're doing all the good things, but you're doing it out of almost not robotic, but you're doing it out of necessity. You see that there's a need, there's a tzorech, that Hashem wants you to do it, so you do it. It says you have to go 2 miles, you go 2 miles on the dot. All right. Then there's the level called chasidut. Chasidut, which we always say is like the higher levels. Lifnei mishurat adin is going above and beyond, going above the call of action. And from chasidut until kadosh, that's going to be the next idea, that you're always wanting to do things not because Hashem says, but because that's what Hashem wants, and that's a higher level. And then he brings down to the last stage called kadosh. And so he says that this is hinted in the Nishmat Kol Chai. Every Shabbat we say Nishmat Kol Chai, and over there in the end of Nishmat Kol Chai it says Befi Yesharim titromam ufsiftei tzadikim tithalal uvkerev v'lashon chasidim tithalal v'kerev kedoshim tithalal. Right, and so he says over there. And if you look at the middle words, it says Yesharim, Tzadikim, Chasidim, and Kedoshim. And he says that's the idea over this book. You have Mesilat Yesharim, right? Because that's the whole idea, Yesharim. And then afterwards you have Tzadikim, which is going to be the first step. Then Chasidim, which is the second step. And then the last step is Kedoshim on that perfection level. And he says, oh, very good. So he says that if you look at it, it spells out the word Yitzchak. Right? Oh. It says Yud for Yesharim, Tzadik is Tzadikim, Chet is Chasidim, and Kuf is Kedoshim, Kadosh. It spells out Yitzchak. And it says that Yitzchak was such a holy, he was one of the holiest, if not the holiest, one of the holiest forefathers. Why? Because he was the one to be sacrificed he was the Korban. To be a korban, that means you can't have any blemishes, and it can't be that you have any certain on the body, but also in the mind. That means he was so pure that he was he was able to be a korban. And so it says, who's the better role model than Yitzchak Avinu to exemplify all of these stages? It also says Yitzchak is the only really person in history to have experienced, or not maybe person in history, but he was the first at least, to have experienced resurrection of the dead. Because it says at the time of the Akedah that that Avraham put the knife on his neck, and there was like 2 drops of blood that came, and at that moment his soul left his body. And then, after this, there's a difference of opinions in Midrashim, how long his soul left his body, what he was doing, but he got another soul. And at that point, he was, the next time we actually see him talk about Yitzchak, really doesn't come down the mountain, really, with Avraham. He stays on the mountain. Next time we ever hear about Yitzchak is when Eliezer is bringing back Rivka, and it says he was coming to bring back Hagar. Rashi says he was by Be'er Lechai Roi. He was bringing back Hagar to Avraham after the whole story. I guess he wasn't at the Levaya. I don't know, of his mom. Maybe he was in Shemaim.
What do you get? New neshama or the same one?
So the some of the Mefarshim, the Kabbalists, bring down that Yitzchak at first he had the neshama of or the Gilgul of Chava, of Eve, and then
before the Akedah.
Before the Akedah. And so he was sterile at that point, because if a man has a neshama of a woman, he can't give over children. And so it says at the Akedah he got a different neshama, the neshama of the man, of Adam, and then he was able to rectify the Adam's on them.
Chava wasn't pure and sinless, so how could
he had to come and rectify that. So all of the ideas of tikkun, of the rectification of souls, is that the soul did something in a previous lifetime that was not good, and so the soul comes back in this world to rectify that. And so Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov had to come rectify the sins of Adam, and then the mothers had to rectify the sins of Chava. And so it says at that moment he had and it says where did Chava's soul enter? It went into Rivka, and that's why Rivka was born at the Akedah, because at the Akedah Rivka was born because her soul was trapped in Yitzchak, and then so at the Akedah it left and went straight to Rivka. And some say at the Akedah she was born. That's why when they first meet, she was 3 years old. The Midrash says, right? She was 3 years old, and Yitzchak was 37. When the time they met, it was 40. At the Akedah, he was 37, and so when they met, she was 3 years old. He was 40. Okay, so that means that when
I've got one question.
Yes.
So explain the coming out upside down.
What do you mean?
It says when Yitzchak came out, like when he came into the field, he came out upside down.
Reach.
Have you heard that one or no?
No, I haven't heard that one. I'll have to check that.
When he comes out to greet Rivka, it says that he's upside down. He comes out upside down. So anyway, so I was curious if you had an explanation on that, but if you haven't heard, never mind.
I'll have to check that out. Sorry.
Okay.
He was praying mincha, correct. It was suach besadeh. He went out to pray in the field. I'll have to check that out. I didn't heard that. So the idea of Yitzchak is again someone who's on a very high level, and so he kind of based it off the Yud Tzadich Kaf Kuf, and also the Chida brings down that if you look in the Nishmat Kol Chai, he says Befi Yesharim. So he starts off Befi, with the mouth I will sing. He says Befi is the Rashi Tevot. It's the first letters of the 3 tzaddikim of the world. Who are these 3 tzaddikim of the world? So the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin says there are 3 tzaddikim that they destroyed their yetzer hara. They were something beyond the nature of this world. Who are these 3? It says Befi. Bet stands for Boaz, the father, the husband of Ruth. Pei stands for Palti, which we'll talk about in a second, and Yud stands for Yosef. So the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin says, who are these 3 people? Why are they considered these tzaddikim of the world? Yosef, we know. I don't think we have to say too much of that. We kind of talked about that on Shabbat, that he was able to resist the temptations of Eshet Potifar, which on his level, on anyone's level, all right, would have been massive. He created the Kedusha, he imbued Kedusha, holiness, into all of Am Yisrael to the point that they didn't sin with immorality in all of the 210 years in Egypt. And we talked about this, and look at what happens here in America after a couple hundred years. The assimilation is up to 80%, they say. And over there in Egypt, what is the assimilation rate? 0.1%, maybe just with Shlomit Bat Ivri, but that was a whole different situation. It wasn't her fault. Not what the assimilation. That's what they say. Assimilation rate in America is 80%.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
and they say it's every, if especially,
Let's not care of anymore. Who needs
especially,
care of?
not necessarily in the religious communities, but if you're looking in the, in the secular, in the colleges, for example, how many Jews go to colleges and then they come with non-Jewish girlfriends or boyfriends? It's hard to control, especially in those kind of situations. It's a melting pot of, especially that's what America is, right? A melting pot of all these cultures. Okay, so I just wanted to, we'll end it off on here. There's so much to talk about. I apologize. So we're saying, who are these three people? So Yosef, like we said, Yosef we don't really need to talk about. Boaz, more commonly known. Boaz, he was the husband of Ruth. It says, and so the Gemara says that over there he was considered a tzaddik. Why? Because that night when he went to sleep, suddenly he wakes up in the middle of the night. He's alone. He doesn't have anyone in the house. Who's like right next to him? This pretty young lady at his feet, and there was all signs. He could have said, it's from Hashem. He's bringing her here. It must be some kind of shidduch, right? It's from Hashem, and he could have easily said, okay, and do the deed with her, right? But he chose not to. He said, I'm doing everything by the book. I'm not. Go back home. We'll talk about this tomorrow. All right? And so on his, again, that's something beyond the nature of man. And the last is Palti. Who is Palti? So it says that there was a machloket between David and Shaul on if Michal was properly married to David. Shaul gave his daughter to David after he killed Goliath, as promised. But there was a question on the Ketubah on if it was kosher marriage, if she was really married, if the Kiddushin was chal. So Shaul said she was not married, but David said she's still my wife, she's still married. So who do you go, like with the husband or the father? So Shaul was the king at the time, and so he sent his daughter to go marry this guy called Palti. Palti was so-called married to Michal, but he didn't agree with Shaul, he agreed with David. And he knew that she was a married woman. But under Shaul's reign, he was married to her. What did he do? He set a sword between the bed. He said, whoever passes this gets cut. And he was like that for years. Not like Yosef, and not like Boaz one night. Yosef, how many days that there was years he was like that. In the same room, it had all the heterim, all of the sides to say that, that's your wife, why not? Years, until the point where they said they changed his name from Palti to Paltiel. That Hashem said, because of your chastity, your tzadkaniyut, that you're going to be called a tzaddik, you're going to be called a part of my name, Paltiel. And so the Chida says that that's the remez here, because we said Befi Yesharim Titromam. That's the beginning of the Nishmat Chol Chai, and then afterwards it brings down the Chasidim, Tzadikim, and then Kedoshim, which is rooted is the main points of Mesilat Yesharim of this Rav Pinchas ben Yair. So B'ezrat Hashem, we'll talk more about that, I guess, next time. If not me, Rabbi Shimon, and we'll finish off finally the Hakdama.
Cool. Thank you so much. Real quick question.
Yeah. Let me just.